Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report, coming to you from Cairo, Egypt. Behind me, the October 6th bridge. This is where millions of revolutionaries stormed and took over a country. Millions storming the Brooklyn Bridge to take out the dictatorship of the New York Federal Reserve Bank. Or how about the dictatorship of the Federal Reserve Bank in Washington? This is ground zero for the 21st century revolutionary movement, the global insurrection against banker occupation. Stacy Herbert, hello, hello. How do you like Cairo so far?
Well, Max, it's fantastic. It's very warm. There are great deals because there's not a single other tourist in our hotel.
That's right, it's fantastic.
But the people are free, and you definitely feel that. They're free, unlike many of us in Europe or America, where we have failed to oust the dictators that have destroyed our economies, just as Mubarak destroyed this economy.
Yeah, it's amazing. The people here, they say criticisms of the government, and then you see them for a moment thinking, wait a minute, can I say that? And then the light goes off, and they're like, yes, of course, I can say that, I'm free. It's the opposite now in the United States, where people will say something overtly critical of the U.S., then they think to themselves, you can see their mind thinking, wait a minute, am I allowed to say that? So here are the two ships passing in the night. One is becoming democratic and free, Cairo, Egypt. One's becoming ruled by a dictatorship of banks, America.
Well, you know, a lot of these, the dictatorships of the bankers in America, as you mentioned them, they came in with Reagan, just like Mubarak had come in with Reagan. We still have these guys. Now, look at this headline, Max. Pentagon tries to blame financial crisis on foreign financial terrorists. Now, even just the headline, it sounds like Gaddafi could have said that.
Yeah, well, exactly. Now that they realize that the problem is financial terrorism, that's the first step. Now they're trying to point the finger at foreign powers. Of course, that's false. The financial terrorism emanates from Wall Street, from the JP Morgans and the Goldman Sachs. They've committed financial terrorism around the world, in Egypt, all over countries struggling now to breathe free, but primarily in the United States.
Well, this was a private contractor who made this report for the Pentagon in 2009, and it's only just been released to the public. And the guy's name is Kevin D. Freeman, and he wrote this report called Economic Warfare, Risks and Responses. And he reports that a three-phased attack was planned and is in the process against the United States economy. But he says this could be coming from Middle Eastern states, Islamic terrorists, hostile members of the Chinese military, or government and organized crime groups in Russia, Venezuela, or Iran. So he's blaming somebody else. And then he goes on to report this. He says, the new battle space is the economy. We spend hundreds of billions of dollars on weapons systems each year, but a relatively small amount of money focused against our financial markets through leveraged derivatives or cyber efforts can result in trillions of dollars in losses, and the perpetrators can remain undiscovered.
That's right, it's leverage. Financial terrorism have leverage. In the case of Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, they're leveraged over 100 to 1. If you consider the mark-to-market issues, they're really leveraged closer to 1,000 to 1. So in the conventional warfare, you can't suddenly turn one tank into 1,000 tanks. It's an analog, old-world style of warfare. But in the financial terror war, or financial terrorism, you can use leverage. And when the Fed keeps interest rates at near 0%, that means your leverage is almost infinite.
Well, but as he's identifying, here is just a small amount of leverage can take down the financial system. And he's saying, but it couldn't possibly have been us. It couldn't possibly have been our banks. It must have been a foreigner who did this. So he's identifying that it was taken down with a controlled demolition, but he said he actually equates it to the equivalent of the box cutters in 9/11.
Yes, the box cutter, a very simple instrument, hijacked a huge jet, took down the Twin Towers. It's exactly right. They should call the credit default swap invented by Blythe Masters at JP Morgan, she should recall those box cutters because they're the primary weapon of choice for these terrorists on Wall Street. And people say, well, how do we know it's American terrorists that are doing this, homebred American financial terrorists? Well, look at the bonus pool. If the economy is shrinking and the unemployment rates are skyrocketing and wages are collapsing, but yet a few people on Wall Street are paying themselves record bonuses, that's your evidence. Are you so stupid, people in Washington, not to understand the connection?
Okay, so this private contractor provided for the Pentagon cover for the financial terrorists. Now, here's a report that was released last week from a congressional commission. report, wartime contractors steal tens of billions, then come back for more. This commission found in a report to Congress at what risk, correcting our over-reliance on contractors and contingency operations. They concluded that contractors, quote, misspent dollars run into the tens of billions of dollars on 200 billion in contracts.
Again, this is a black hole of non-accountability. That's why America starts the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a place to launder money. It's a place to throw money into the pockets of financial terrorists. Of course, $10 billion channeled back to Wall Street is $1 trillion in derivatives used to attack such things as the precious metals markets that are attacked routinely by these guys because they fear precious metals to keep their fiat currency, fractional reserve, 0% interest rate, reign of terror alive. And it's just remarkable that people in Wisconsin, for example, in America, are struggling to keep their little itsy-bitsy union wages against the growth of the money supply there. And people attack them. In America, they attack their own because people are getting a living wage. And yet they do nothing about the terrorist. Right there, Scott Walker, who's down with the Koch brothers and other terrorists.
So the commission report goes on to say that this tens of billions stolen could be an understatement because, quote, it might not take full account of ill-conceived projects, poor planning and oversight by the U.S. government, and criminal behavior and blatant corruption by both government and contractor employees.
People, take a cue from the millions that streamed over this October 6th bridge and toppled a dictator. Stream over the Brooklyn Bridge, stream over the George Washington Bridge, stream into Washington, D.C., surround the Federal Reserve Bank, demand that the dictator leaves. You owe it to yourselves to breathe freely for once in 200 years, or since 1913 when the Fed was created.
Yeah, but all of those go back to the military-industrial complex, Max, because the money supply started to grow with our unfunded wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Americans, for some reason, think that they get a free war, and they just get to steal stuff with no cost to it. But as Egypt showed, as soon as you start to build this military-industrial complex, this corrupt military-industrial complex, it feeds on itself, and you have all sorts of hanger-ons start to, take more and more money.
Yeah, well, the problem is the U.S. They don't want to compete anymore. They've grown lazy and fat. They don't want to compete with the workers around the world, and so they get involved in these wars where they just steal money, they print money, and they're involved in kleptocracy and cronyism. And this is, again, two ships passing in the night, Egypt going toward freedom and the U.S. going toward kleptocracy.
That's right. Well, let's look at another member of this military-industrial complex who got too much prominence, I guess, in the last few weeks. So now he's no longer buddies and cronies with the Tony Blairs and George Bushes and Obamas of the world. The dictator's dough, astonishing wealth of Gaddafi and his family revealed. The astonishing wealth of Libyan tyrant Muammar Gaddafi and his family has been laid bare as countries around the world begin freezing billions of dollars worth of their assets. The U.S. alone has seized $30 billion, while Canada has frozen $2.4 billion, Austria $1.7 billion, and the UK $1 billion.
And that money came in after the Patriot Act. A lot of it did.
All of it, yeah.
During a period of supposedly these new anti-money laundering, money for dictators laws. So here you have selective prosecution and a two-tier legal system. If you're a dictator, like Gaddafi, we'll take your money. We don't care who you kill in the name of America's donut franchises. But if you're a hardworking American, we treat you like garbage. We treat you like scum because we think should be working as slaves on our Wall Street plantations. No, of course you should revolt. What are you waiting for?
Well, just as the U.S. government commission report into the military contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan said that it could be an understatement how much was looted and stolen, the same thing in this report. They're saying that these assets could be just the tip of the iceberg because that's the stuff that was in a bank account with a number. They don't know where all the other wealth is hidden.
Right, well, the first thing Americans should do is, en masse, 1 million or 10 million should immediately pick a day in the future to coordinate using a Facebook-type revolution, 1 million foreclosure, walk away. Just walk away from your mortgages, because the banks who sold you those mortgages are financing terrorism. As a matter of fact, you would probably save lives by walking away from your mortgage, because every penny you give a Morgan or Goldman Sachs, they just use it to fund terrorists and kill people and murder people and starve people. So do your species, the human species, a favor. Don't pay your mortgage. Don't give the cancerous terrorists any more of your money, unless, of course, you want to live in a prison.
Well, so let's look at how what is going on in the Arab revolutions going on is the U.S. wanting, and the European countries wanting to maintain their monopoly on weapons of mass destruction. EU arms exports to Libya. Who armed Gaddafi? And this is a Guardian expose of looking at just the EU countries and how much they sold in weapons to Gaddafi since 2004, when Tony Blair went to Tripoli and camped in the tent with Colonel Gaddafi. And you see Italy, France, and Germany are the top 3 countries in Europe who exported $834.5 million worth of arms in the first 5 years after the arms embargo was lifted in October 2004. And then there's a breakdown of the chart of the details. And you see that most of the weapons were with Italy and France, and they exported mostly military planes. But Germany supplied nearly $8 million in tear gas, chemical weapons, and radioactive materials.
Well, of course, they're no stranger to this kind of thing, but they're supposed to be by law, not participating in any kind of military budgets. But of course, what does a law mean these days?
But the other thing is, this October 2004 arms embargo was lifted because Gaddafi said, I'm going to give up my chemical weapons and nuclear program.
Right.
So then Germany supplies them with new stuff. So it's a racket that the US and Europe operate. You're a bad guy unless you take our radioactive and chemical weapons.
Right, so it's an arms dealing Ponzi scheme, or shell game, to be more specific.
Yeah.
One person says no more weapons. They do it through another cutout, another country, another backdoor financing, another dark exchange, another offshore balance sheet. And of course, Gaddafi, I don't know what his career is going to be once he leaves Libya, but he could join one of these shows in America, like America's Got Talent. He could be one of the judges. He's got the flamboyant costumes, and he's very good in front of the camera. You know, he could be one of those judges on one of those shows like Terrorists Got Talent, featuring Goldman Sachs bankers. They compete as to who can come up with the most extravagant weapon of mass financial destruction. And I would imagine Blythe Masters gets the win right away. She's the winner.
And then finally, Max, gold buying by China jumps as investors seek to protect wealth, UBS says. So this ends with our first headline, really, where they're saying that economic warfare, financial warfare against America is happening. Well, purchasing gold from China is an act of economic war in a way against America. Gold purchases in China, the world's largest producer, climbed to 200 metric tons in the first 2 months of 2011.
Well, since we recommended that revolutionaries arm themselves with gold and silver, their positions have doubled, tripled, quadrupled in value. And that's going to be the same for the next 5 years. As the American banking, global banking dictators topple, precious metal prices are going to continue to skyrocket. Stacy Herbert, thanks again so much for being on the Keiser Report Special Edition from Cairo, Egypt. Are you going to join the revolutionaries?
I'm on my way to Tahrir Square.
Excellent. Don't go away. Much more coming your way. Stay right there.
Observe nature and discover its beauty. Communicate with the wild and learn. Test yourself and become free. See what nature can give you on RT.
Hi, welcome back to the Keiser Report. Coming to you from Cairo, Egypt. I'm joined now by investigative journalist and blogger Hisham Alam. Welcome to the Keiser Report, Hisham.
Welcome.
Now, Hisham, first, congratulations on your revolution.
Thank you.
So how does it feel to be a journalist in the new Egypt? How has your job as a journalist changed?
I think it's gonna be more easier than it was in the past because we will have more freedom, more ability to express our opinions I think we can negotiate about the laws that strict liberty of journalists in Egypt. That was in the past constitution, so we can make it more free.
So what, going forward as a journalist, what are you going to be focusing on, do you think? What is going to be the main focus, do you think, going forward? Will it be the new constitution, coming up with a new constitution for Egypt?
Yes, for sure. But first of all, we have to bring these guys who got the wheels and the fortune of Egypt abroad. They are related to the regime, the ex-president and his family and their cronies. All of them, we have to judge them again to see how much money they get out.
Right, so I saw signs that said no cronyism, no nepotism, and so a lot of talk, of course, preceding the revolution was that Mubarak, who was stepping off stage as a dictator, apparently
Yes.
his son was ready to take his place.
Yes.
And this kind of, people were ready, this was it, they had it, we don't want it anymore. So what is the status of Mubarak's wealth? Have you been able to seize it? And then his son, what's the status there? Any information about that?
We don't have any confirmed information about their wealth, but some people estimated was 70 billions Egyptian pounds. But I think it's a kind of overestimation. It cannot be like that.
Okay, so 70 billion. And of course, you have this fantastic chart. It shows the main tree and the branches of corruption.
Yes.
And obviously Mubarak's at the top, and his family. Then his wife apparently was controlling.
Yes.
And then his son.
Yes.
And any other highlights on that chart? Anything stand out as being particularly interesting for you right now?
We have to know first that 4 of these guys are imprisoned, okay, and they are facing trials, fair trials. One of them is the ex-minister of Interior, and he had a trial last Saturday. And also we have to know that the people on the streets, the demonstrators, didn't accept just kind of a change. Last Thursday, they succeeded to change the prime minister and to bring another prime minister who has some kind of access towards the street people. So this kind of change, this kind of acceptable pressure that people want to continue and they were treating with the forces, armed forces.
So Mubarak and his son Gamal, they're very friendly with the bankers in London, the bankers in the United States.
I think so.
There's a huge conflict there. In the U.S. particularly, they talk about being anti-dictatorship and anti-terror, but then they finance Gaddafi and they finance dictators.
Yes, this is other kind of these countries that makes people here and all the Arab world have fears toward the developed countries, especially United States and United Kingdom and Switzerland. So we cannot accept just their choice or their support for a specific candidate for presidency. So people doesn't trust any kind who got loyalty toward United States or to the West in general.
Right, so the U.S. is not seen as a force of liberation or good. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Look, we have an experience with Iraq. Okay, Iraq doesn't have democracy yet.
Right. So when Egyptians and across northern Africa, when they think about the revolutions, they think, oh, the U.S., if they get involved, well, we're going to be like Iraq, and Iraq is a terrible example.
Yes. And Egyptians also decide to bring democracy on the Egyptian way, not on the American way. And this is a point right now.
Right. And so when Hillary Clinton, I noticed she said that recently that the American media is atrocious, that the media at Al Jazeera and RT and other media outlets have been much better at portraying the reality on the ground as versus the U.S. media. Do you concur with that? Have you noticed the difference between the way the U.S. is covering this and the way maybe, let's say, an RT, Russia Today, or an Al Jazeera is covering it?
The West coverage, specifically the American coverage, it was quite balanced more than the Arab ones. Yes, Al Jazeera was making some kind of overwhelming overestimation for the incidents, for the numbers of injured and dead people. So as a journalist, it doesn't accept all the information comes from Al Jazeera. Okay, but looking to CNN or, for example, for BBC, I have to think twice. Yes, they may be right.
Let me get your take on this about the third rail in the Arab narrative. We've had the Islam fundamentalist story. We've had more of the Arab story, the dictators who are in control. And then there's a third story, which is this Facebook revolution story.
Yes.
Is that true? Is there a third story? And will this third story, will it be as important as the other two stories, or can it push out the other two stories and become the dominant story?
Look, I don't think that the Facebook revolutions or supporters cannot push out the two sides, but they can. They have the power to face them, and to get a specific place, a strong place between them. But in fact, they cannot accept all the Islamists or even the dictatorship regimes to come back anymore. But we need them. We need diversity. Okay, we can accept everybody, all the opinions, but we cannot give them the chance, the opportunity anymore to come and to rule us.
You're going to be rewriting your constitution. And do you think, I just had this idea while we're talking here, is there any room maybe in the Constitution to make an official acknowledgement and representation of somebody representing the Facebook element of Egyptian society? In other words, the senator or from Facebook. In other words, it's the virtual population. Should they be represented in the Constitution? Do you think this, I just thought of this idea on the spur of the moment. Does this make sense to you?
No, for sure it will not. It will not, because, for example, if any country, any company had bought Facebook, so what? It cannot be accepted. But the guys of Facebook, of Twitter, of blogs, or anything, they can constitute political parties and participate in the political life in Egypt freely. And we have some examples already who started making some parties, and they are about to declare their parties soon as the constitution being public for referendum.
I want to talk to you about the moment, the actual moment in history when the use of a social networking site like a Facebook and a Twitter, when suddenly it became seen in a completely different light. Tell us about the story when you were using the social networking sites really for trivial purposes, and then suddenly there was a spontaneous recognition that you could use it for something else. And I thought that was remarkable because it was a spontaneous flowering of a concept that happened suddenly, which led to this mass uprising. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Ironically, we had some statistics that said that all the Arab guys are using internet just for sex, just for looking for porno and making kind of entertainment, networking, but nothing more. But
not you, of course. I mean, you're serious.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm serious.
Okay, fine.
Once upon a time, these guys had approved for all the world that these guys can make change. They can change regimes. They can change destiny of nations through internet.
A lot of people say that the revolution that happened in the videotape industry was driven by porn. People say that the internet industry was driven by porn first, before there was anything else. So you're saying that porn is the basis of the revolution?
No, for sure. I don't mean that. I don't mean that.
Okay.
For sure, I don't mean that.
But you're saying that. Well, anyway, so there was a spontaneous combustion of this idea,
Yes.
which swept across like wildfire.
Yes.
And then you had this idea to just get up out of your chair and start walking over this bridge behind us.
Yes, for sure.
Let's talk about the future, because at first in Tahrir Square there was this mass uprising, but now it's taken on a new phase, a phase where every Friday there is a gathering. So what happens on each Friday, and what is the goal now in the next few weeks and few months?
I think that people will get the opportunity for the new prime minister to achieve some of the achievements that should be done. He will change some ministers who are not accepted in the streets, and he will work to release some political imprisoned and detained. Also, he will work to make more freedom for expressing the opinion and for press and media. As we know that Al Jazeera got banned, and some of the independent newspapers and media are suffering from pressure even through the era of the last minister, Dr. Shafi. You know that some independent journalists were banned to appear on private channels, and they forced them to cut over the interview with him.
Right.
So we are not completely free yet. So we are practicing some kind of pressure on the new prime minister to give us more freedom, not to make any kind of censorship on media, and to give the people the right to express themselves in the right way, the right to demonstrate, the right to judge, even the president himself, as this was not allowed.
When you say we, let me ask you, who is the leader?
No leader.
No leader.
No, the people, the Egyptian people are the leader.
That's a new concept in freedom.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to seeing how this plays out, and we'll be back again to check in. My guest has been Hisham Alam, who's a blogger. We've got his website on the screen right now. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you.
Okay, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Hisham Alam. Here's his blog site. Check it out. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.